Hey, 1010 students. For your lecture this week, I want to do a follow-up to the Plummer article or lecture. I wanted to just talk a little bit more about it. In my face-to-face class, we really dig into this, and I think it's super helpful. For you guys, I want to pose a few questions, and I want you to think about and reflect on those things. So I actually have several pages of notes. I'm going to be looking at my notes here, and then I'll just talk to you. Sorry, it's not more polished. One day, I want to have really awesome videos that have like images and stuff, but getting there. All right, so just to recap, over 30 years ago, Thomas Plummer gave a faculty lecture to Delta Phi Alpha called Diagnosing and Treating the Ophelia Syndrome. In that lecture, he talks about Ophelia from Shakespeare's Hamlet, where Hamlet is interested in marrying her, and she's getting advice from her brother. And he says, hey, be careful about him. And then her dad, Polonius, is there. And she's like, well, Dad, what should I do? And Polonius says, think yourself a baby, which means, let me tell you how you should live your life. And this is the Ophelia syndrome, this idea that we should have someone else tell us how to think and what to do. Now, Ophelia, she's ignorant, she's submissive, she's dependent, and she chooses to make herself a baby. Now, that's the problem. Obviously, all of us go through different times in our life where we need people to tell us what to do. Developmentally, that's part of life. We need to be Ophelia in those times of life as we're growing up, as we're learning how to have independent thought. And as we're growing up and becoming more independent, it's okay to have authority figures tell us what to do. And even as an adult, there are times in my life where I'm 100% comfortable with saying, I trust this person, I'm seeking advice from this person. I'll still consider their feedback, but I want to know from them what they think is the best course. So one of the great things about being in college is we're learning, this is a great place to practice, right? Thinking for ourselves, doing things differently, trying new things. And that can get some students into a lot of trouble. And unfortunately, college is a place where a lot of people crash and burn, where they try things, where they have an identity crisis, and it leads to mental health issues and physical health issues. And that is something obviously we want to avoid against, but we do want to learn how to be more independent. So Dr. Plummer gives 6 treatments for diagnosing and treating the Ophelia syndrome. And it's not, it's not, here's how to challenge everything in your life. It's not how to find an easier way to do things in life necessarily, but it is how to find a better way. And so I'm going to go through these treatments, talk a little bit, recap them a little bit, but also give my take on it. So treatment number 1, seek out and learn from the great teachers, regardless of what they teach. This one's an interesting one. I definitely did this when I was a student at university, and I was at university for a long time because I got a bunch of degrees. And I can see that some of my best experiences were learning from the best teachers. In fact, I ended up getting a job from one teacher because I heard he was phenomenal. And I ended up becoming his secretary and learned so much from him. And that was a worthwhile experience. I had another teacher who taught a study skills course, and I heard that the class was good, but the teacher was even better. And that certainly was the case. So I took that class. I had another teacher who was way different from the other teachers. He was way more hands-on. He would do actual projects in his class. And I loved that class. Now, in all 3 of these examples, those were some of my hardest classes I ever took. They were actually a lot more work than other teachers. And this is where I worry for students, because if you're seeking out the best teachers by going to something like ratemyprofessors.com, I have a love-hate relationship with that website. It actually was around when I was a student. It was brand new, and I used it to look for teachers and find out who the best teachers at my university were, at least according to students. And there were a lot of ratings. It was a really popular thing at that time. And you could get a good feel for who the best teachers were, or at least who the most liked teachers were. And that's the problem here, is a lot of these online surveys are popularity contests more than they're actually giving good advice, because you're only going to do an online anonymous review if you either really, really loved the teacher or really, really hated the teacher. And often people aren't posting how much they learned in that class and how much it impacted their lives. And so you have to be careful with stuff like that. But it is a starting point. Now, a better place to be is to ask roommates, to ask people who have taken those classes. If you're in a major and you are part of a club or something, and associate with people who have taken the classes that you want to take, find out who they took it from. Now, we're at a smaller university, and often you don't have the choice of which professor to take if you're taking a certain sequence of classes, and that's unfortunate. But what you can do is, especially for electives, ask around, find out what the best classes are, who are the best professors, take classes that you don't have to take. And for me, that was some of the most rewarding experiences I had, taking ballroom dance classes and gymnastics and Photoshop and Dreamweaver and coding and music writing. I took some amazing classes. I also took a bunch of anthropology classes where I studied other cultures, and those were very worthwhile for me. But it was asking around, finding out what the best things were, and then I just loved it. It was a great experience. Also, teachers don't have to be traditional teachers. When it says seek out the best, some of my best experiences in life were finding people I really admired and asking them if I could just take them out for lunch and ask them a few questions. And I've only done that a few times, but it was always a worthwhile experience. I've also done other things where like new people moved into our community and we had them over for Sunday dinner, people that I didn't know at all. And I started that tradition when I was in college. We would have people come over to our house with my roommates, and we'd make Sunday dinner for new people in the neighborhood and things like that. And it was a great experience. You can also, I had one other point on I wanted to know certain things about certain groups. And so I started a YouTube channel and a podcast, and I interviewed people. And I had so many good experiences interviewing professional athletes, Hollywood celebrities, and things like that, just because people want to help. And if you reach out to them, I've met so many amazing people just with cold emails or social media messages, direct messages, using LinkedIn and things like that to ask questions of people. And it's amazing who will respond, especially if you're willing to serve that people or a different group of people with that person. And so I have found that people are mostly good. And if you have questions that you want to ask, people are happy to help you. All right, that's enough for treatment number one. Let's go into treatment number two. Dare to know and trust yourself. So how do you get to know yourself? This one's a hard thing. He recommends taking personality tests, keeping a journal, writing letters. None of those things worked very well for me, except keeping a teaching journal. I found that I would take notes during devotionals and lectures, actually lectures very similar to the one he gave. I would just go in and be thinking about random stuff. And that's kind of like another treatment, fostering idle thinking. But for me, that did help to write things out. Today, I do it a little bit differently. I actually love to go for long walks, and I transcribe ideas so I'll listen to a podcast or something like that, and then I'll get ideas and I'll transcribe it into my journal, which is on my phone. So I'll just have an audio journal now. That's really helpful. Some of the things that I think you should do for self-discovery, and in my face-to-face classes, I'm going to actually take time to do this. So I recommend you actually pause this and do one of these three activities. It'll take you like 10 minutes. One is, if you have a bucket list already, to review that and revise it, because some things you probably don't care about anymore and some things you've accomplished. If you don't have a bucket list, make one. In 10 minutes, you can make a list of all the things you want to do in your life. And then when you read over that list, it will tell you a lot about who you are. So that's one option. Another thing is, I had a teacher, again, when I was in college, that it was a business class, and he had us write our own obituary. So we would have to think through financial decisions we made in our life, but it was so interesting to learn about ourselves, especially if you do this in a detailed way. So you would write about, where would you live during your life? Who would you marry? How many kids would you have? What accomplishments professionally and personally would you have throughout your life? What would you be known for? And I took that assignment seriously. I wrote a full page, like on a document. And then over the next several years, I would review that, but then I would also update it and write a new version. And I did that for many years. I haven't done it in a while, and maybe I should try it again. But it's interesting to look back over the last 20, 25 years and think, oh, my life didn't go at all the way I thought it would, but my life is actually better in many ways, and I've gone in a different path. But just the act of writing that obituary is so insightful. So that's a potential activity. And the third one, and this is something that I transcribe into my journal, and I do this at probably at least once a year, is talking out or writing out what would be your perfect working day and what would be your perfect week. So like a normal week, what would it look like? What time would you wake up? What would you do when you wake up? How would you spend your morning? What would you do for lunch? How would you spend your afternoon? And if you do it for a whole week, it can include the weekend and things like that. Sometimes I do a whole month, so I can include like some things I want to do once or twice a month. So, but that's a really cool activity, and it helps you to get to know yourself. All right, so that's treatment number 2. And again, I highly recommend pause this and do one of those 3 activities. I think it would be totally worthwhile. Treatment number 3 is learn to live life with uncertainty. So he talks about having a healthy mistrust of authority figures, especially the media, which I totally agree with that. It's really easy to purport to be an expert, but often experts disagree. And so he says, get a second opinion, study it out, think about it for yourself. And I totally agree with that, but I also struggle with it because I like routine. I like having a schedule. I like having some certainty in life, so I know my bills are paid and things like that. So when we think about living life with uncertainty, I think there has to be a way of having some uncertainty in life, but also having some assurity that what you're doing is making a difference. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this if you want to put in the comments. How do you do that? How do you live life with uncertainty, but still feel comfortable moving forward with the things that you are doing? So that's treatment number 3. Treatment number 4, practice dialectical thinking. That's thinking in alternatives or opposites. He talked about a student he had that wrote his feelings or his journal in dialogue, just to see that. This is something that when I taught 5th graders, it was really interesting because many of them are still egocentric. They literally think the world revolves around them. And so it's hard for them to see others' perspectives and viewpoints. I think one thing that you can do to practice dialectical thinking, especially in college, this is a perfect opportunity to do that, is when you go to class, and you can sit wherever you want, as you get to know your classmates, from time to time, intentionally sit by and do small group discussions with people that you know you will disagree with, people that come from different cultures or backgrounds. So maybe you're not disagreeing with them, but you're seeing a different perspective. But maybe you are picking someone who's from a different political leaning or religious leaning or gender identity or whatever. Find someone who's different from you and get comfortable asking them questions and genuinely listening to them and getting their perspective. This will help you to think through different sides of different issues. It will be a really good practice. Treatment number 5, foster idle thinking. This is the one that for me, when I heard this lecture, this treatment changed my life. Thinking about making it a priority to go out and just think. I mentioned earlier that I would go to lectures and I would just take notes on what kind of teacher I wanted to be in the future. So I had a teaching journal and I just took notes on that. It didn't matter what they were talking about. I do this today by going on long walks with my wife, where we do this together. So we just discuss whatever we want to in the world, but when we're out and walking, for some reason, those conversations are so productive. I do this by myself by putting in headphones and listening to podcasts while I go jogging, and I jog really slow, and I always give myself time after the jog to cool down, and that's where all the ideas that I generated during my jog, I transcribe it into my journal, and I love that time. I've had that habit for over a decade now, and it has been so helpful for me in developing new ideas and doing things that matter in the world. He talked about taking long baths, going for walks or hikes or bike rides, reading books or magazines. The question of, is binge watching Netflix something that fosters idle thinking? Yes, but it's like super idle thinking and maybe not as productive. I think there's a fine line there when it comes to video games, things on your phone. I just deleted a bunch of games off my phone today because I found, like, yesterday I tried a new game and it was like a Tetris type game. And I loved it. And I played it for actually a couple hours and got to where I didn't want to do other things because I was playing my game. But as I reflected on my time during the game, was it idle thinking? No, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was thinking about the game. I wasn't generating ideas during that time. It wasn't helping me see the world in a different way. It was just sucking my time. And I find so many things that come from this little box do that, whether it's social media, other apps, even organizational apps and things like that. You have to be careful with your phone. So, you know, foster idle thinking, but in a way that it's productive. Treatment number 6, plan to step out of bounds. This is where he thinks about the general bounds of thinking, reading, writing, learning in general. He talked about how his students wanted to take a different kind of final exam. And I think you have to be careful here. You're not stepping out of bounds to find the easy road. That's not what this is all about. It's finding the better road, right? And so questioning things that don't make sense, that you don't see the value in that. And in the academic setting, it's totally okay to do that. And teachers often are like parents. You ask them, well, why are we doing it this way? And unfortunately, and I'm guilty of this as a parent and as a teacher, sometimes the response is because I said so. And that's a horrible response. That's like the worst thing ever. But what that is code for is right now, that's the easiest way for me to do this as a teacher. It's the easiest way for me to move forward. I haven't had time to think through a better way to do this yet. And so if you're going to plan to step out of bounds, the key there is having a solution. So if you don't understand why something works, come up with a better way yourself and propose that. Don't just say, well, this isn't very good. This isn't the best way to do it. Because everybody would love to do it the best way, but often the best way does take a lot more effort. And sometimes people don't have that time available or the mental capacity or energy available to make changes. So if you're going to propose changes, have a proposed solution. So that gets you through treatment number 6. I'm going to add a treatment number 7. This wasn't brought up in his lecture at all, but I think it should be. And so this is, and I didn't fully agree with everything he said, and that's totally okay. In fact, that's kind of the point of what he was saying. But I wish he had said something about community. So my treatment number 7 is find a way to get involved in one of your communities. Now, chances are that you are part of several communities. One of them might be the university community. One might be the actual local community. One might be your church community. One might be a club that you participate, or an interest, a hobby that you are involved with. But I feel like now more than ever before, it is so important to be involved with a community of other human beings that you actually interact with. And I think that's good for your mental health. I feel like it's good for your creativity. I feel like it's good for your productivity. When you are involved, when you're going and seeing other people do things, whether that be a performance or a show or something, when you are as a spectator going to those things, it can be inspiring. Sometimes being involved in your community means trying new things or being exposed to new ideas, and that's going to change your life for the better. So my advice to you is find a way to get involved with at least one of the communities you're already a part of. And if you're not a part of one, find a community to join. Finally, the way I want to end this lecture for this week is I do want you to think specifically about what you can be doing to improve your life, to not be an Ophelia, but to learn to think for yourself. And what I'd love to see in your reflection today, of course, you can include anything that has stood out to you from this lecture, but I would love to hear if you came up with your own treatment for the Ophelia syndrome, something that wasn't mentioned by Plummer or by myself. What do you think that people could do right now to become more independent learners, more independent thinkers, to be more creative and productive in their life? So I would love to hear your suggestion for a treatment for the Ophelia syndrome. If you wouldn't mind including that in your reflection, I would really love to read that. All right. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.